If you want to learn real history, real economics, and real political theory, then check out Liberty Classroom. Go to wakeupcallpodcast.com/liberty. That's wakeupcallpodcast.com/liberty to learn more. Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Call Podcast. Today we're speaking with Mr. Ryan McMaken about his articles Privatize the Public Monuments and Thomas Jefferson is Greater than Robert E. Lee. Mr. McMaken is editor of Mises Wire. He was the economist for the Colorado Division of Housing from 2009 to 2014, and he is the author of Commie Cowboys, The Bourgeoisie and the Nation-State in the Western Genre. You can follow his work at Mises.org. That's MISES.org. You can find him on Facebook under McMaken and on Twitter at Ryan McMaken. That's at Ryan McMaken. For more information, please see the show notes page for this episode at wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-monuments. Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us again. So this whole issue surrounding public monuments, it's been an issue and a controversy for a while now in the U.S., but the whole issue really blew up after the Charlottesville tragedy and the whole controversy surrounding that incident. And we've seen other controversies and incidents all around the country, in Tampa, in Durham, all over the place. We're seeing this issue pop up. And I really like the way your article addresses this issue. So let's just start there. Your article, Privatize the Public Monuments. Can you give an overview of your article and what some of the key things are that you're arguing there?
Sure. Well, the main idea is that if you actually cared about your culture, you would take steps to buy land and put monuments on it. There's kind of this idea I keep hearing from people who want statues of their heroes on publicly owned thoroughfares and in publicly owned buildings and publicly owned areas, and they want somebody else to maintain them, somebody else to pay for them. And it's hard to say that because then they assume that you want a statue of the other guy's heroes, right? So if I don't want a picture of Robert E. Lee on the side of the public highway, then I must want a statue of Lenin there, because of course people can't break out of their tribalist thinking most of the time. So they think, oh well, they want to tear down my picture of Robert E. Lee. The next thing they're going to be putting up a picture of some leftist monster. And we can't have that. The reality, of course, is that if he's your hero, put him on your own property somewhere and then just demand that somebody else's hero not get a free statue or not get a public place to put their statue there. The other benefit of this, of course, is that we're not fighting over it all the time. And we don't have to go to these city council meetings and waste our time having a debate over whether there's going to be a statue of Columbus or whoever on the median near the town square. I mean, and people have a hard time even imagining, gee, how would you even do this? It's really not that hard. Rather than putting your little Ten Commandments thing on the lawn in front of the state capitol, how about you buy a lot right next to the state capitol, and then you can put whatever monument you want right there, and everybody who walks through the state capitol grounds is then going to walk by your monument. It's not that complicated a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Adam has seen this. There's a place right beside 290 and Highway 6 called Frazier's down here in Texas, and there's a ton of traffic that goes through there, and they sell these little like garden gnomes and stuff like that. It's a pretty big place. Everyone drives by these statues. They all know. If you wanted to, you could just buy that plot of land right there and you could put up whatever statue you wanted and tons of people would see it. So I agree. I think it's absurd. You know, if you really, really want this statue to be here, you can pool your money collectively and buy a little plot of land off the highway and just put it there.
Well, in the examples I use in the article, since I'm a practicing Catholic and here in Denver, I just use our local examples here where 100 years ago, the church wanted to feature their stuff in a prominent place. So they bought a lot on the hilltop next to the state capitol. They put a big cathedral there. Thousands of people go by it every day. They recently put a big statue of John Paul II there, and the taxpayers aren't maintaining any of that. This is all privately funded. It's all in a prominent public place. But this is a case of people taking their heroes seriously and actually expending the time and the energy and the money to commemorate those people rather than whining about somebody else needing to put it on public land somewhere.
Yeah, and one example that we just saw relatively recently was there was a Confederate monument in Tampa that a lot of people wanted removed. There was a big controversy around that. The price tag associated with removing the monument that came from the local government there was astronomical, as local government price tags tend to be. And yet there were enough people in that community, led by icons in the Tampa community, by sports teams in the area, GoFundMe page. There was enough support that right away, within a day or two, they had the funds to take the monument down and to move it to a cemetery in a suburb so that would be out of the way of the downtown area. And that right there, just from the last month or so, that's an example right there of people being able to use private resources to get this sort of thing done.
Well, and I should note that I genuinely feel bad for some of these people. I mean, a lot of these statues were created and funded by little old ladies, like, 80 years ago, who wanted to commemorate their fathers, maybe, or their grandfathers who died in the Civil War and things like that. Now, I'm not a big, Confederacy booster, but I do feel for these old ladies who went through all this effort to make these statues because, they cared about their fathers and such. These are like personal emotions that I understand. Now, the shame, though, is that they then collected all this money to make these statues, and then they handed those statues over to the city because they were too cheap to maintain the statues themselves on a piece of private land. So now, of course, that plan is coming back and biting them in the butt. Of course, they're all dead now, those little old ladies, but kind of their successors are now being bitten in the butt because they decided, well, let's have the state take care of all of this stuff. But the state now has been taken over by people who disagree with them, who have a different ideology. And so now there's nothing they can do in many cases to stop the removal and destruction of these monuments.
Sure. Yeah. And a couple – yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that I think one of the big problems with that is whenever you have the state kind of having control over something that the culture starts to disagree with, you're going to have controversy. And the culture's changing so much now. Things that used to be, nonchalant and nobody really cares about it, all of a sudden everybody cares, right? Like the national flag controversy, or the national anthem, controversy now too. And if we just had, a song that was played at different football stadiums and there wasn't a national anthem or the government wasn't involved in any way, there wouldn't be a controversy, right? As the culture changed, those things would naturally change if it was privately owned and there wasn't like a government actor in the mix. But whenever you put the government actor in the mix, it kind of messes things up and everyone says, well, this obviously we have to make this decision as a large group, right? Or that we have to vote on it, we have to pass a law, and it just becomes overly complicated.
Right, and as long as we're stuck with city roads and plazas, city buildings and property and all that stuff, there's no law written in stone that says, well, we have to adorn these places with statues of famous people, with controversial political figures and stuff. It's simply unnecessary. Now, I guess some people in some parts of the country, I guess this is really a big thing down south. I'm a Westerner myself. I grew up not surrounded by statues of generals and such. Most of the statues around here in Denver are of like anonymous cowboys, not even specific people. Or maybe like some settlers, some pioneer women in memory of pioneers and things like that. But even that's extremely rare. We just don't need statues of everything. So, it's a shame that so much time and energy has been expended doing this. But just imagine if people really cared about this. So we got a statues being removed from a lot that's in a prominent place. It was a city park. If people really cared, they would immediately be able to come up with $100,000 or whatever was necessary to purchase a small plot of land right next to that park and move the statue there. But it seems to me that people really don't care that much, that all these people who claim that their history is so important to them, nobody seems willing to spend $20 with a few thousand other people to come up with the funds to actually take care of the statues. So I actually question how much people really care. And maybe that's the reason they hand this over to the state in the first place, is because they're just too lazy to preserve their culture, which they claim they're really into, but they can't be bothered. I mean, a perfect example, of course, is Stone Mountain, which I think is as good as destroyed at this point, right? That relief of Lee and Stonewall Jackson and everything in Georgia, I think that's going to be dynamited before long. But they used to be private property by Klansmen who owned it. So, but that's not necessarily important information. But they were Klansmen, but they were cheap Klansmen because then handed over that land to the state of Georgia, and they're like, oh yeah, well, it's 1958. I'm sure the state of Georgia will take care of this stuff forever. We'll just give this land to them. They didn't give it, they sold it, and I'm sure probably made a killing from some crony capitalist deal they made with the state, and then figured, oh, we'll just wash our hands of it. We don't have to take care of it anymore. And now it'll probably be destroyed. Too bad. I guess they should have planned ahead a little bit more on that one.
And can we talk about these quotes for removing the statues? I was talking with Adam. I'm gonna stop my day job. I'm going to become a professional statue remover. How much money does it cost to get rid of a statue? I don't know. Maybe I need to talk to someone. I can't imagine it costing that much money. I mean, sure, you gotta rent some like a lift and stuff like that. But you can actually rent construction equipment not $100,000 a day expensive. So I don't know.
I'm sure it's all just a scam. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's not any real competition there. Somebody knows a guy in state government or whatever is going to have it removed.
If you want to win debates and be able to better argue free market ideas, check out Liberty Classroom. For a mere 24 cents a day, which is less than $8 a month, you can learn real history, real economics, and real political theory. Go to wakeupcallpodcast.com/liberty. That's wakeupcallpodcast.com/liberty to learn more and to become a more effective debater. Yeah, now I want to address this slippery slope argument, and we've heard even Donald Trump mention this one. Oh, why if they take down the statues of Stonewall Jackson and Jefferson Davis, then Lee's next, and then it goes to Jefferson and Washington. And there does seem to be some evidence, I guess, that the slippery slope is a real thing. In New Orleans, which was the big flashpoint for this whole controversy pre-Charlottesville, we've seen calls for removal of Confederate monuments, and then there have also been calls for removal of monuments related to Joan of Arc. So there does seem to be some evidence for this. Now, what are your whole thoughts on the slippery slope argument? Now, obviously, it's not as good as privatizing all of these monuments, but if they're going to be there, what do you think about this slippery slope argument? And well, if we remove these monuments over there of horrible people, then eventually those monuments of other people are going to remain.
Well, I'm not sure the slippery slope issue. It's not like it has a power unto itself, right? It's not like if you just start removing statues, more statues are going to get removed. It's really just an issue of the people who support the human beings or movements that these statues commemorate are losing the ideological battle. So they haven't convinced people that Robert E. Lee is a good guy or that Joan of Arc is a good woman. And so people are perfectly fine with removing those things. That's just a matter of the fact that the people who support those things have lost. They have succumbed to the ideological battle being waged by the people who hate Robert E. Lee or Joan of Arc or Christopher Columbus or whoever. Now, these are all complex historical figures, really, and there should be a debate over whether they're virtuous people or not. But the fact of the matter is that there's not really a debate because the side that wants to preserve Robert E. Lee, they lost that argument decades ago. I mean, nobody values those old Confederate generals anymore, except some pockets of people down south. They're not going to get a lot of sympathy from people out west, even simply because they're not in the history books anymore. Those people have lost influence in the public schools and all that. So they should really be focusing on preserving those monuments because they've already lost that battle.
Yeah, and let's jump into the Lee discussion a little more here, because his name does seem to come up a lot whenever the discussion of the Confederate monuments in particular comes up. And I even hear some libertarians defending Lee when I thought libertarians were supposed to be anti-war. So what are Lee's accomplishments? In your article where you compare Lee and Jefferson, you talk about Lee in the Mexican-American War, Lee in the Civil War, but what are Lee's accomplishments, and what can really be said about Robert E. Lee?
Well, my perspective on that was mostly from a Mexican War perspective. I know a lot about the Mexican War, not so much about the Civil War. Because I'm a Western guy. Western history is more my interest, not so much Confederate history. However, Robert E. Lee was part of the Mexican War, and I just simply pointed out that when we're told that Robert E. Lee was this great hero who defended his homeland, that should make us raise our eyebrows a little bit, because here's a man who had no problem with invading someone else's homeland and helping to invade Mexico. And now we're supposed to think about what a hero he was, and what a gentleman, what a man of honor, and all this stuff. And I'm skeptical of that position when I look at his behavior in the case of the Mexican War. And I note also that he was already wealthy by the time of the war. He could have resigned his commission. He didn't have to take part in that war and do the things he did. So this was a man who voluntarily took part in a war of invasion against people who had never in any way threatened him or invaded his homeland.
Yeah, and then there was his involvement in the Battle of Cerro Gordo. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I'm not sure that the details are ideologically important. He was a good tactician in that case, and managed to get the upper hand, and his success there led to the deaths of many Mexicans. I guess the important point of the Battle of Cerro Gordo is that it was in Mexico and not anywhere near Robert E. Lee's home. In no way was Robert E. Lee defending his home from Mexicans. And so it just illustrates that here's a man willing to travel 2,000 miles to shoot somebody else in their homeland.
Well, I mean, don't you know, all government employees with a gun who go to other countries and kill people, they're always defending our freedom. And haven't you heard that?
Well, that's kind of the point I made in the article, too, is that just because he did these things 150 years ago doesn't make them charming or honorable or gentlemanly. He's no different than someone who flies halfway across the world to shoot a foreigner today.
And I think one thing with the monuments is we see these monuments, and I think the idea that we have when we see kind of a government monument is, oh, look, the government is preserving this history and it's going to be here forever and it's preserving the culture. Give me the quick and dirty argument. Why shouldn't people trust the government to conserve their culture and to conserve their history?
Right. This is naive in the extreme, right? This is what a lot of you could kind of call it the Christian right, but you shouldn't think of it as the modern Christian right. What we're thinking is of religious conservatives and authoritarian types from, say, about 80 or 90 years ago. These were people who were really supporting the creation of public schools to civilize, quote unquote, immigrants and to Protestantize Catholics who were coming into the country, and this is in the teens in the 1920s. So we need these public schools to Americanize these immigrants. We'll teach them good traditional Christian values and things like that. Watered down, certainly, but good kind of traditional Bible reading sort of stuff. And so what they assumed was that, of course, public schools will always be this instrument of wonderful King James Version Christianity sort of stuff. And we'll have people reading the Bible in schoolrooms for the next 200 years. That's, of course, not what happened, right? Is that the public schools ended up being seized by the forces of the left. And now what they teach, of course, are kind of these cultural Marxist hard left values, and in every way undermining the values that the people who founded public schools probably wanted to preserve. So it's silly then to put your historical legacy of whatever group it is you want to support into the hands of government, because who knows who's going to who's going to be in charge of that stuff 40, 50, 60 years down the line. It could be someone you really, really don't want to be in charge of things, and so you should really think a little further ahead.
Yeah, and ideologies change, the way groups are viewed changes. Just look at, and I think you make mention of this in your article, just look at how Eastern Europeans have been viewed over time. These things change. What values are being promoted, what values people hold in high regard, they change. And if you're putting all your faith in the public schools or in public monuments to promote your culture and your ideas and your values, not only is it a bad sense from the standpoint of the taxation issue, it's just a bad way to go about promoting what you hold dear to you.
Yeah, in many ways, they have it backwards, right? They think that keeping statues up in a city park somewhere is going to make people believe in your values. But that's not the way it works. It goes in the other direction. The reason people put statues up is because they believe certain values. So once you've already abandoned bothering teaching people those values, once you've already lost the ideological war, once people already believe some other ideological system, then they don't care about your statues anymore. And you can put those statues in a park somewhere, but that's not going to reverse the trend. What is going to reverse the trend is completely changing what people learn in school or what they learn at home. But it seems that when people should be teaching their children a value system they value, when they should be giving their time and resources to their church organization or to the community organization or to the educational organization that will preserve their values, they can't be bothered. They're too busy being upset over whether somebody's listening to the national anthem or not to bother. Whereas 100 years ago, more responsible ancestors spent their time and money building things like universities, schools, churches, all those sorts of institutions that preserve these values, as well as teaching those things to their children themselves. But now, just put them in a public school somewhere, and if they don't get taught what we want to get taught, we'll go complain to the school board for a few minutes, but then we'll go home because we got to catch the championship sports game on the TV and stuff our faces a little bit more with whatever's at Five Guys burger joint or something. I'm just amazed at these protests that people claim they've given so much to these ideological values that they claim they hold dear, but they don't seem to be doing much at all.
Yeah, it's a shame that folks don't take a bit more like agency and try and really take control of the things that they say that they care about. Do you have any additional thoughts as we kind of wrap up here about the monuments? Anything that we've missed?
Well, it's just kind of amazing to see how impotent really a lot of these more traditional and right-wing groups have become. It seems that constantly the left is pushing for more and more of their ideological agenda, some of which I agree with, much of which I don't. I don't necessarily share all the same heroes with many of the people on the right. But I look at my own religious tradition, and I've never seen it as the state's job to preserve any of that stuff. It's my job to make sure my children are educated in a way I think they should be. And so I just kind of roll my eyes when I hear all of these complaints about how our history, quote unquote, is being erased when our history is preserved by making actual effort to preserve it, whether through institutions or through our children and so on. And I really have no confidence whatsoever that the right is going to get its act together and really take any action to do this at all. They don't even seem to know how. They don't seem particularly interested in founding or sustaining institutions that are important for this sort of thing. And so until that changes, there's not going to be any change in all the stuff we see going on every day.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. If someone wants to learn more about this issue and wants to learn more about your work, where would you direct them?
Well, for all my stuff, just go to Mises.org, and you'll probably see on any given day at least one article by me on the front page.
Okay, great. Mises.org. Yeah, that's definitely a great place to go. So if someone goes to wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-monuments, I encourage you to go there. That's the show notes page for this episode. And of course, we'll link to Mises.org and the Mises Wire and all of the relevant and appropriate resources for this episode, including the 2 articles that we have discussed here today. So wakeupcallpodcast.com/public-monuments again is the place to go for this episode. And I want to encourage everybody to sign up for our email list and subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes or Stitcher or your preferred podcatcher while you are on our website. And Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today to take a look at this very divisive and controversial topic that has been in the news a lot over the last few months, and unfortunately probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great one.
All right, you too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wake Up Call podcast. If you'd like to listen to more episodes, please check out our website at wakeupcallpodcast.com.
There you will find show notes pages and comment sections dedicated to the show. You can also contact us via our website. And thanks again for listening.